Hello and welcome back to Play. I predict a very, very special guest this week in front of his beautiful Christmas tree and all. So he's really in the spirit. He's Micheál Schlingermann, new Athlone goalkeeper. I had to think there for a second. I've been so reliant on you in the last season in my own maroon and white, having you watch it all. But firstly, Micheál, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us. How are you all keeping?
Good now, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here and have a chat now. Like you said, we've got the Christmas tree up and everything. Probably a little bit earlier than I would have wanted here at home, but I was never.
Let's not
I was
even go
never.
towards that
No,
conversation at the start of this.
I was never winning that battle now with the year we've had, like that.
Yeah,
So
no, if we can get any sort of joy at all into our lives, that way. Well, I want to start off just briefly what I'd kind of do with most people, and I always give the story of the people that had most influence on my kind of sporting interest and getting that little bit of love and bit of growth for it. And it was my parents, particularly my mother, bringing me out playing football, and then my parents bringing me to games, etc. Who would have been your biggest, I suppose, influences starting off? So you grew up in Mayo, probably in GAA mad country more than anything, starting off initially. Who were your early kind of, suppose, steers in that very successful sporting career that you have to date?
yeah, I suppose my earliest memories really are my next door neighbours. So there was a group of lads that would have been a good bit older than me, a couple of years older than me. But obviously, as the young kid, I wanted to go playing football with them all the time. And we had a little place across the road called the Tech, so it was one of the tech schools, and there was a little concrete football pitch there with wooden goals set up, and they would always be over there, and I'd run across the road and try and get involved. But of course, then as the youngest, there was only one position where I was going to be going, and that was in nets.
So, I can see where your career is developing already.
I think, look, I'll have to thank the lads for that one. The likes of the older boys that I was. So they would have been, I suppose, my first playing influences, and then I suppose growing up in a German household, football would have been very.
Yes, of course.
Very prominent. My dad and granddad. My granddad especially would have had a real love for football, and hopefully, that's where I got a bit of the talent from as well. Dad would have played actually hockey in goal, but my granddad also played a bit in his youth as well.
Oh, very good. And would you have any, would your family have any, I suppose, attachment really to any German football club, or?
Yeah, my granddad would have been like one of the sponsors within a club there called MSV Duisburg.
Okay.
A long time ago, he had a business and he was involved, but the way football went in Germany, then it got very, very popular, and actually the club became quite successful then as well. I think there was a cup final. They played in the German Cup final a couple of years ago, but then after building a new stadium, went into administration and all that as well. So I think they're sitting in the third division now at the moment, but they would have been for a couple of years up and down from the first Bundesliga to the second Bundesliga.
Oh, I can see it was a very, I suppose the interest was sparked there straight away. You didn't really have a choice in the matter, but you probably, would I be right in saying that Gaelic football was the first major sport you would have played more? I'm just going back to my own environment, growing up where GA was probably the number one community sport, for want of a better word. Something similar for yourself?
Oh no, massively, yeah. So the parish I grew up would have been a solely Gaelic football parish. And as I was growing up, I think in 2002, then the soccer club was funded. It was an amalgamation of two small villages, so it was Kilchmaw and Knock United. We were the Kilchmaw part. But I would have always played for Knock United at the time as well. But like you said, Gaelic would have kind of taken priority up until I just started myself, then getting the love for football then. So obviously there comes a time when you have to make a decision. I was lucky in that I played in goals. I was able to manage the both for a very long time up until minor level. So after minor, then I made the decision to go solely in the direction of football, and it was kind of more or less thanks to Paul Cook at Sligo that time, who gave me my debut and gave me a taste for the League of Ireland. That was in 2009, so it's a long time ago, 11 years now.
That must be a very crazy time even thinking back, because you of course played Mayo minor that year as well, I believe. You got to the All-Ireland final. I think it was a defeat to Armagh, if my memory is correct.
Yeah.
Not to stir up any bad memories, but it must have been a very busy time, because you're kind of, I suppose you had, and everybody knows about the fanatical GA support of Mayo and how much of it's kind of all parts of life is really associated with. It's your conversations, it's in your schools, it's in, everywhere you go, it seems to be attached. But at the same time, you're balancing that with, or just about to join Sligo as well. That must have been, from a sporting point of view, you must have been flat to the mat around that stage.
No, I was. I remember trying to manage the both. I just remember being lucky in that Paul Cook at Sligo was very accommodating and basically kind of said to me, I could go and play Gaelic football and use that as my priority for that year while I was still in the age bracket. So there was games, we'll say, at the time it was the A League, the League of Ireland A League and the under 20s. So I would have been playing in that group quite a bit. But once the kind of knockouts came in the minor season that year, I was solely focused. I probably didn't, I probably went up to 1 or 2 training sessions at Sligo in that time, but as soon as it was over, then I was back into the full-time training, kind of traveling up 2 or 3 times a week to train with Sligo.
Was that a difficult decision, not to turn your back, because obviously it's always going to be there, your roots, but making the decision to go down the football route was that a difficult one?
You said it there. It was never a case that I felt like I was turning my back or that the door was closed. I always kind of intended on coming back anyway. I suppose it just so happened that I went to college in Carlow on the FAI sports management course down there, and I would have spent a lot of time away from Mayo then as well. And at the time then I signed for Athlone and ended up in Drogheda then as well. So I actually spent a lot of time away from Mayo. So I didn't get the grief I probably would have if I was at home all the time. So why are you not playing and stuff? So no, I did. I spent a lot of time away from the sport, but I was kind of building myself, and I was building my profile, and I was my belt, and had some success along the way as well, which was nice.
Your time at Sligo, even when I see you described it now, it seems to be a lot of happy memories from that time.
Yeah, especially the first time round, because it was my first real taste of senior football and I suppose first team football. I remember we got to that cup final in 2009 as well, and I was lucky enough to be on the bench for that. Like you said, it was in the same year that I had played in the All-Ireland minor Gaelic football final as well, and actually we had the club All-Ireland final with Kilshima too in that same year.
You must have thought everything in life is so easy here now.
It was. I tell you what, I found out later down the line it just doesn't work like that. There was definitely setbacks later on in my career, but no, it was really, really fond memories, and like that, I think it was a time in my life I would love to kind of go back and experience again if I could, because at the time it just goes quickly and you don't take any notice, especially as a young player. There's so many things that if I went back to now, I'd obviously be taking a lot more notice of, and that through experience down through the years and that. But no, I'm just thankful that I got those opportunities at that time. And what I will say is I was quite lucky in that I got to make my debut that year with Sligo, and I had a manager that just wasn't afraid to throw a young fella in, and that time I made my debut was on the telly against Bohemians the night they won the league in 2009. Right. So
what a debut to have, because
couldn't have asked for a bigger debut, to be honest with you, within the League of Ireland, and that was Pat Fenlon's Bow side that time. Very, very strong team, and we were probably decimated with injuries at the time. That was probably the only reason I played. But
I know, don't play yourself.
thankful now that Cookie threw me in.
Yeah, no, it was, and you're thinking back to times as well where I think we're almost at saturation point really in terms of live football at the moment. There's almost every day of the week there's an abundance of games available to view. It wasn't like that, even though it's not that long ago. It wasn't like that back then, and even particularly for League of Ireland games, the fact that your debut was televised against such a big team as well, it's almost I don't think you can underestimate how big an occasion that was, and particularly for your own personal point of view as well.
Yeah, it was huge, but funnily I don't remember feeling, even now I don't remember feeling nervous or feeling worried or anything. I just remember getting on the bus and one of the lads going, "You're starting,"
the innocence of youth almost, isn't it?
Yeah, because I would have actually missed 1 or 2 of the sessions during the week because I was in college in Carlow at the time. So Cookie rang me to come up for the last session before the game, the day before the game. So I shot up from Carlow and missed my Friday down there missed my Thursday, down there to get the game, to get the training session in Thursday, and then obviously travel with the team Friday to Dublin. So definitely, I don't remember really feeling much about it. And again, I think everybody always says about their debut or any of those big games, they seem to go by, and you can't remember the specifics afterwards. I just remember we lost 3-1, and we were kind of battered in the first half. The game was over, and we just, the second half was probably just Bohemians seeing the game out,
Yeah, so that was quite a way to start things off. I suppose things like a lot of, I guess akin really to a lot of League of Ireland players. From here on, you went on what is almost described, I think someone heard described probably best before, as the footballing journey in Ireland, where you kind of not bounced around, but there's always a bit of moving around. And the League of Ireland, for anybody that doesn't really follow week, that closely, it's a very it's very short-minded thinking. I think a lot of players or a lot of clubs sign players for a season or something like that, and then they seem to start from scratch again. There's no real, particularly maybe barring aside from a couple of the top clubs, everything is so short-term there. So you do find players that almost every year it is the shop window, and there is a lot of movement. But you went on to Athlone, and of course we'll touch on Athlone again a little later on, the club that you've recently re-signed for. But from on to Athlone, but the one that I have to say, and it's probably a story that you're probably sick to death talking about it, but it is that move to Monaghan, really. Like, I still can't get my head around how you can recover from a situation like that. Like, so Monaghan were, everybody knows Roddy Collins, even not from a footballing point of view. He's such a cult hero, for want of a better word, and TV documentaries and stuff like that. Likes to wear his suit. There's that clip that went around again, even recently enough, about telling the fourth official where he could and could not stand. He almost is a celebrity in himself. But you sign for them, and then all of a sudden the club is wind down. And I believe, if the story I read is correct, you found out on social media as well that things had gone belly up. How on earth can you put that into words, in terms of, we all know Irish football, unfortunately, can be a little bit unstable, but this just took the biscuit altogether.
Yeah, that was a bizarre situation. What I have to say is, I know you touched on Roddy there. I know public opinion is a massive mixed bag with Roddy. I have to say,
I'd say you'd make you run through walls for him, I'd say, would you?
Honestly, one of, like, him and his family have to be one of the nicest people I've ever met. Like, in terms of Roddy, I got to know his daughter through Burnsy, who I played with as well. Roddy Jr. Like, there has been loads of controversial things, but I have to say, from my experience, I have nothing but good things to say about Roddy. An absolute gentleman. When I left Sligo, he rang me after couple of years not having spoken to him, and that, like, with an opportunity for me to go to a club in England. Now, I just got the job full time, and I just got in with Mayo GAA, so I had commitments at the time. And he gave it don't play that in GAA, and what I have to say was, it was out of the blue, but it meant a lot to me, and I think it sums him up in a way, just his kind of thoughtfulness for other people and things like that as well, and he'll always do something for you if he kind of can, and it was obviously something came on his radar, and he said, I might know just the fella for you, something as simple as that. But I have to say, an absolute gent to deal with, and it was unfortunate. Look, things didn't work out that time, and I don't know the ins and outs of why it didn't work out, but what I have to say is, he tried to sign me the year before, when I was still at Athlone, halfway through the season, to finish off the year with Monaghan. They ended up getting promoted. He had success that year. He got Monaghan into the Premier, and then it was about building on it. I suppose just things didn't go midway through that year. It was funny though, because we'd actually just knocked Sligo out of the FAI Cup. They were the defending champions, and I think we played Pats in the league just before we broke up for the mid-season break, and all of a sudden, like you said, one day social media, you're looking at and saying Monaghan has gone out of business, and then you're all, you're ringing around the lads then to say, what's going on? Have you heard anything? And nobody had heard anything, until we actually finally got confirmation that what we were reading was true. And then obviously there was the couple of weeks afterwards of not knowing how your kind of future was going to be, what the story with your contracts were, in terms of, could you sign for another club, or did you have to wait for a deadline? Then when you went to another club, you were cup tied because you'd played in the League Cup and FAI Cup, because we played Sligo in both. We played them in the League Cup, they beat us, and we played them in the FAI, and we beat them. So the players that played in that were all cup tied. So a club looking like a Shelburne looking at you, or a Drogheda looking to sign you, you could only play in the league games for them. So, if it came to you and another player who wasn't cup tied, they'd probably get the nod. So there was a lot of kind of issues. And again, I think I spoke about it before. I was okay. I was a young lad. I was in college. I would have gone anywhere just to play football. But those lads with mortgages, with,
all the grown-up stuff.
Guys relying on that extra income for a reason. I know you probably shouldn't rely on that extra income as part of your life or whatever like that. But there was lads there that were out of pocket for a long time because of it, and then the uncertainty then of not knowing where your next kind of club was going to be, and having to move midway through a season, which is always difficult.
Yeah, it was. Even now, I'm still struggling to get my head around of how a situation like that was allowed to happen or did happen, because with the amount of money that it is in the game, you only look across the water, look at other leagues, and even as we've since found out in the FEI itself, and that was wasted and squandered. It seems to be a constant. What is the old thing? The problem child. I think that the league was kind of mocked at, and it's kind of stuck there for a while. Like, you've been around the beat a lot, in terms of you've seen a lot, seen more than you probably should in a lot of ways. How, and even what always kind of confuses me is that like general football sporting fans don't necessarily, or there's a bit of a turn your nose up approach to the league as well, whether they could be obsessed with a team across the water or in Scotland or England or whatever. That always I find very, very strange. I have to say that there's some great not some of the facilities do need a kick in, but there is some very good facility as well. There's some great football. There's every Friday night there is an option to go down. Obviously, COVID has put a spanner on that, but it will be back even prior to that. Why do you think the league doesn't get that same level of interest? Like, look at Mayo GAA. I know there's obviously community environment and it's built in a little bit more, but why do you think it never really kicked off? Is it simply just down to like lack of TV coverage, lack of money, etc., be pumped in, or do you think there's a deeper issue? Now it's hard to throw it into, but
I think both are probably linked there. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert on marketing or any of that kind of stuff. Like, but I do personally. I don't know. I think it's a culture thing, because, like you mentioned Mayo GAA. Mayo GAA is a massive culture. It's a religion in a way down here. The whole county is behind. Obviously we're looking forward now again to another All-Ireland final, and I work in a company where there's a lot of people, and the talk every kind of Monday morning, if Mayo are playing, is about the match. And the Friday leading in, it's everybody's talking about how will they do this, that and the other, team selection, and it is, and that's the culture there. But you see, because of that culture, then businesses will invest, because they know they're going to get their exposure from it. What I will have to say is the league here has got much better in terms of exposure for your poster boy players. But like, for example, in Mayo, like, you've got your mini celebrities within the team, whereas in Sligo, and again it goes back to what you're saying there, you've got lads coming in for 1 year, then going for 1 year, so they're not going to be up on billboards, they're not going to be on bus stops and things like that, because they could be gone next year. Whereas in Mayo, like, you've got the players are there for as long as they're good enough to be there, so they can pump more money in. Sponsors, can pump more money in because they know that the exposure is there. So it's probably both. It's a culture thing, but also a financial thing as well, of investors wanting to put their money in and knowing that they're going to get a sound return on it.
Yeah, because even if you just without going off on a side tangent, you think back to, and it's one thing I did notice, particularly towards the end of the season just gone by with Galway United with the playoff run, I did feel that we were getting back on a little bit of the old, where all of a sudden more and more people are talking to you about the games. And then we had, of course, some of the surreal kind of very newsworthy stuff in terms of the appeal, and on the last day of the league Galway weren't in the playoffs, and then it went on drama. I never want to hear about the word arbitration again. So I think there's still smoke coming off my phone from those couple of days. But and then it got into the playoffs and won the semi-final, and it was getting back to a stage then where there was interest. It was becoming, the game was covered quite a lot, but that's not the norm really for Galway United
No.
games. But you look at Mayo, and then it's just boom. So I think it's probably a combination of both. But let's hope that we can push on. I know Stephen Kenny involved. You'd hope is a big kind of step in giving it, even just for want of a better word, a bit of recognition for the league, and the fact that players actually, okay, well, not saying that everybody in the league is a world-class footballer and should be playing international football, but they'll get a realistic chance, and they will look at players, and players will be picked where previous managers wouldn't even know about players there as well. So you've probably seen small steps, but it's still a long way off where things need to be.
Yeah, no, I have to say, in I suppose favour of the league, and in with a bit of kind of a bit of a clap on the back, like for me, I think the streaming of the games was
Absolutely.
really successful. I think that is a really, really good option for the league. I think it increases exposure. I thought the price was fantastic. I know I have a couple of Bowls mates, and they paid for every game, or they bought the package so they could watch every game. And I do think that should continue, even if we're allowed to have 10,000 people in the grounds. I think that option should still be there, because it allows people all over the world to watch. It allows people all over the country to watch the games. And then obviously on social media, if something happens in a game, you've got the footage.
The Flores goal is out straight away.
Yeah, well, I know that was on RTE, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. But I remember being on UK radio stations the next day talking about that. And, did you see this goal? Yeah, I was at it. Like, all of a sudden, it just shows the power of social media, the power of marketing.
And you have that clip based on the stream, because you have it recorded, and the club, I suppose, has the rights then to it, so they can put it on their own pages and things like that as well. And then obviously, you look at the rest of the package that was available too.
There was a very good save during that period as well that came to social preference or prominence really on social media as a result of streaming as well.
Oh, stop! Yeah. I just remember thinking, just don't get beaten from there. I was thinking to myself, I think it was more of a tackle than a shot, wasn't it?
It was. I was just about to say, for anybody that doesn't have a clue what we're talking about, it was the Galway Longford League game in Longford, actually. I think Galway had just kind of overturned the game. I think it was a 2-1 at the time, maybe 3-1. It definitely was.
Oh no, we were up in the second half, so they were 2-0.
Oh no, sorry. So was it?
We equalised. So I think it was 3-2 or 4-2.
3-2 perhaps. Yeah, I think it was one goal in it. Yeah, and what I can only describe as an absolute, the ball breaks just inside the Longford half, and it's one of those kind of tackle, cross, clearance, boot, ever was, but the ball went sailing. You were a bit off your line. It came flying from the whole halfway, and I just remember looking, going, "Uh-oh!" And here Superman himself comes flying back and just gets a hand out and puts it behind for the corner. Probably one of the best saves I've ever seen in real life. But we must dig out that clip as well. It's always nice when you see going after a game and you see something like that doing around, as opposed to somebody saying, "How did you let that in?" or whatever.
No, I know. No, I appreciate that. Thanks. I suppose again, look, if the game wasn't streamed, the footage wouldn't have been there of that either. So it wouldn't have got the same exposure. It would have been just a tweet or something saying a good save.
Did you see that save?
Appreciate that. Now it's always nice to make one of them.
Absolutely. It was an important one as well, as the way the season developed out. Where were we? You were left Monaghan in crazy circumstances. We talked a bit more about how the league is a bit unstable. Then you went on to have, I suppose, a very successful time at Drogheda. Obviously, Drogheda kind of have gone up and down for a little while. They're back up in the big time now, and I do think, just and again on a side tangent, I do think it's pleasing to see what Drogheda have done in terms of they've gone up to the Premier, but they've rewarded most of their players from last season as well. A huge amount of them have already swiftly been offered new contracts, which is always pleasing as well. Put that little bit of uncertainty to one side. But you had some great times yourself there.
Yeah. I suppose just to probably rewind a bit before that, I would have had that decision at Sligo to make, to leave and get games, because obviously I was third choice at the time, so I got some very good advice from people around me to go and play football. So the director of the course down in IT Carlow arranged for me to join Athlone, or go train with them first and play a trial game, which actually just happened to be in Dalymount against Bows as well. Played very well in that, and the manager signed me up straight away after that game. Eventually went on to play about 50 games for them before moving to Monaghan, and again getting in there and getting a couple of Premier Division games, and again just probably, I suppose, increasing my profile a small bit around the league, as a young up-and-coming goalkeeper. I wouldn't have had massive amount of appearances, but I'd have enough for people and managers to know who I was. And then obviously moving on to Drogheda, where, again, going in halfway through the season, Drogheda were absolutely flying. We were second in the league, pushing for Europe, still in the cups. And I didn't get in that season because Gabby Sava was there and he was flying. I think he got in the RTE team of the year that year. And Drogheda had a very, very solid defence. The amount of games we won 1-0 that year, I think, was something else, And Mick Cook actually, he approached me midway through the season, said, "Look, I want you to come in and push hard," which I did, but there just wasn't an opportunity for me to play within that season. I think I made my debut in the very last game of the season when we'd already, we'd qualified for Europe, and I think we just got knocked out of the FAI Cup as well on penalties. But we actually won the League Cup that year as well, but I was cup tied, so I wasn't allowed on the bench for that. I was up in the stand with 2 or 3 others who were also cup tied as well. But look, we had a fantastic year, and I have to say, to this day, probably in touch with 3/4 of that group of players. We'd have our little WhatsApp group that still exists and still gets a good few things in it, So that's a really, really fond time. And obviously the following year, then we pushed on from that. Had the Europa League game against Malmo, and then the 3 cup finals of that year. Now, unfortunately, obviously didn't win any of the cup finals, but again, just experience, looking back, fond memories. There was success there. We were probably really unlucky in the league that year. We drew a lot of games. We should have probably finished a bit higher, because we actually built onto our squad from the year before, where we'd finished second behind Sligo, and I think we finished mid-table outside the European positions, and in the end our only chance at Europe was the FAI Cup, which we then didn't get, so we didn't get Europe for the second year running. And then I suppose from there, then we kind of regressed each year. Johnny Mack came in after Mick. We'd Robbie Horgan first, then Johnny Mack. Damien Richardson was there for a bit. And we also had, I think Pete Matten took caretaker charge for a little while as well. And then we finished off that year getting relegated, unfortunately. But after I left, then Drogheda bounced straight back up into the Premier, and like you said, they've been kind of thereabouts, but fully deserved to go up this year.
Yeah, no, I think everybody you'd want to be an awful diehard, very biased supporter not to recognise that they were the best team in the first division this year. I thought they blew it in the Athlone game after the great result against Bray. I thought, here we go. But no, they got their just rewards in the end, and that was a great night. There was some great scenes there out in Cabinteely at Stradbrook the night they won the league. You went back to familiar territory then after that, really, after leaving Drogheda, back to Sligo when it goes back to what I kind of touched on the start, where there's a lot of movement around, really. It's crazy when you obviously we all know your career, but when you kind of describe it through it, you realize how interlinked it all is. There's so many, and you see that with players as well. There's so many players that have played for multiple different clubs or have played with each other. It's a kind of a tight bond of network of contacts, for want of a better word as well.
Yeah, well, obviously, now that we're the day after the PFAI Awards, I suppose congrats to Tim as well, manager of the year as well. It was funny you mentioned that, because that group of Drogheda players included Dara Doyle, who obviously was the manager now at Longford, who beat us there to get the into the final of the playoff for promotion. And then Tim was actually my roomie for the first year at Sligo as well. He's now managing Drogheda now. If you saw the way we lived, you'd wonder who the adult was and who the young lad was. Because I seemed to do everything for him, So there was cooking there. That he'd come in and ask me what I was like. The wife I was asking me what's for dinner. So no, well done to Tim. Again, fully deserved. He's he's built a good team there and have them playing in the right way. And it's great to see someone you know so well have a bit of success despite your own. You'd like to be in that position with Galway yourself,
I must ask him the next time I'm talking to Tim then about his cooking habits, maybe.
Or lack of.
Or lack of, yeah, might be more apt. But moving back, and I suppose this is where the next journey really started for you, really, if we can
Going back to Sligo, was it?
Go back to Sligo, I guess. Is it because this is around the time, am I right in saying this is where the GAA started to re-spark a bit?
Well, I suppose, I obviously, I had that really, really good season at Drogheda despite getting relegated, and I got my move. And now, funnily, I'd met Sligo the year before that as well, but I'd opted to stay on at Drogheda for another year, where I played every minute of every game that year as well for Drogheda, which was great. So I got the move. Robbo took over at Sligo, and I think I was his first signing there as well. I remember meeting him when he just got the job. And I was delighted to go back because, like that, I in my head at the time I saw Sligo as my forever home. After that, I'd had my success at Drogheda. I'd been living in Dublin for a couple of years. I had a job in Dublin on the side of football as well within the FAI, and I saw it as my chance then, my opportunity to go full time. Put all my eggs in the football basket, go back to Sligo. I signed the 1 year deal with Robbo, and then halfway through that year I ended up signing another 2.5 years. So I was contracted in for 3 years there at Sligo, and that was my ambition then, was to stay there and be successful there. We had a really, really good first year at Sligo. Now we actually had a shaky start, to be fair, but we kind of, in the middle of the year, around summertime, we just hit form and we were kind of winning, or we weren't losing games, so we went on a really, really good run, and actually just missed out on Europe. But again, we kind of built a really solid group of lads. You had Kieran Sadlier there, Jimmy Keohan, who are two
great players,
really, really successful now. In the UK, Jimmy with Rochdale, and Sads with he's gone to Rotherham now. He just got injured there this year now, but he was he got his move to the Championship after kind of a sensational enough year with Doncaster. So we had them players there at Sligo at the time, as well as others as well. Like, there was other successful players there too, and good lads, but we never really, I suppose the second year we never really pushed on from that. And actually at the end of that first year I missed the last couple of games with an injury, so didn't get to take part in that final push for Europe. But all in all, you would have seen it as a successful year because they just avoided relegation the year before, when Owen Heary was there. So I suppose moving on from that then into the second year, pressure came on because we had such a good first year, but I suppose we didn't really manage to keep hold of some of the key players. And I know, midway through that year, then we kind of hit a bit of poor form, and we ended up losing the manager. A new guy came in, and we just about survived again that year. And then again, I suppose pushing on into the third year, we were looking to strengthen, but didn't really strengthen an awful lot, and ended up in a bit of chaos. And that's, I suppose, where things really fell apart for me at the club. Halfway through that year, then I ended up leaving, and to be honest, I had hoped that I had an option at another club. I was training with 2 or 3 other clubs at the time, but then restrictions from the FAI came in on those clubs that they couldn't sign players because of financial issues. Again, the joys of the League of Ireland. Yeah, so that was when I had to get a job. Obviously, I had to pay the bills. I had to pay my way, and that's where I suppose I came into the job here in Mayo, and went back playing for my club a bit towards the end of that season. But only, to be honest with you, at the time I wasn't fully committed to that. I had still intended on getting back into the league, but the way the timing worked out, and I suppose with the number of goalkeeping positions available across the 2 leagues, it just wasn't possible. And again, I couldn't justify moving to Dublin to play for a first division team when I didn't have a job sorted or any of that kind of stuff going on.
How difficult was that? Like, I know you had a bad neck injury as well in Sligo, and you'd kind of gone for the joys of having 2.5, 3 year contract in front of you towards
Yeah.
personal injury, and then the uncertainty of not knowing where your next club is coming from, and all that. Personally, mentally, that must have been a very tough time.
It was tough, yeah, because at the time as well, it was midway through that second year. I started feeling my neck and shoulders sore, and I was just playing through it every week. I was getting through training. I was, taking the anti-inflammatories that I needed to take, and things like that. The usual, like, you manage it.
Sticky tape sort of approach.
So it was papering over the cracks, to be honest. And eventually, it packed it in, and it was actually, we played Cork in Turner's Cross, beat them 1-0. And my missus had the Rose of Tralee the same weekend, so it worked out perfectly. I was able to get off the bus in Charleville after the game and
full of life.
Across the Tralee. So, but it was after that weekend. It was actually after the game on the way to Tralee. I remember just feeling like battered. I felt like I think I couldn't lift my arm above a certain height without pain and that. So when I returned to training on that Monday, then I remember not being right and couldn't train. And I remember just pushing myself through that week. And it was at the time where there was cup games. We were out of the cup, so there was like a massive long wait. The only game we had coming up was actually an Iron Brew Cup game, because other teams were doing well in Europe at the time as well. So all our games were it was 3 or 4 weeks before we had a league game. So I thought, right, now I'll get it right.
Get sorted.
But it never came. And I just remember doing a session one day, feeling the pain coming right up the side of my neck, and then the next morning when I woke up, couldn't lift my arm or anything like that. So went and got it sorted, and it turned out that I'd ruptured 2 discs in my neck that I'd obviously been playing on and playing through for weeks. So it was then that, no amount of painkillers or anything like that was going to be able to allow me to get through it. So missed the rest of that season with that injury. And I just remember the new manager had come in at the time, and I remember just not feeling like he fancied me. Do you know, like, when you just get that feeling, manager doesn't fancy me here. So I think, I don't know, at the time I remember him, making a passing comment about my injury, saying, one of these kind of cliche things, keepers are soft and all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously he's joking around, but I never really believed it at the time, and I just, there was something there, and I can't put my finger on it now, or I can't say, because I'm not obviously in the, it was just a feeling I got. It was how I felt. And I kind of remember saying at the end of the year, I had a year left on my contract, and I said, look, if you don't want me here next year, I'd rather, go now and try and sort myself out and get a new club if I have to, and stuff like that. And, I got the assurance, no, you'll be here next year, get your neck right, get injury free for pre-season, and we'll have a good go. And I did that. It was great. Like, and I ended up playing, obviously, the first game of the next season. But that's when we brought in the new signing from Chelsea that time, who, again, it probably just justified my feelings of whatever anxiety about it, was that this fella just doesn't fancy me and he wants to get somebody else in. So that was the way it worked out. We chopped and changed for a couple of weeks. I remember I played the first game. He played about 3 or 4 in a row, and I remember at the time thinking, I'm gonna just prove him wrong. That was my attitude at the start of that season, and eventually I did. I got back in after a couple of games. Then I had a nice little run of games where I was playing well and that. And I remember the game. It was against Derry. We lost 2-0, and I made an error for the second goal, and it was called up after the game. He said to me, I should have done better, and I said, yeah, I know. And after that, then I was dropped again. And I suppose after that, then it just kind of, it never really came back for me after that. With him, I'd say the trust was gone for him. So eventually, when I went and spoke to him, I asked him straight out, what were his plans for me? And he told me straight out that I wasn't in his plans. And in fairness, Ed McGinty was the young keeper there at the time. He said that Ed was ahead of me in the pecking order, so I was third choice, and that's the way it was. So we kind of mutually terminated the deal. And like I said, I only probably mutually terminated because I thought I had something lined up to be able to play anyway, so I didn't know that things were going to work out the way they did, because, to be honest, if I'd known I wouldn't get a club for the rest of the season, I would have stayed and battled it out, But the fact
hindsight is great, isn't it?
Well, the fact that I thought that I was going to have somewhere to play, and that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to play football, and the club I was going to was bottom of the league anyway. So, you know, it didn't matter to me who they were. I just wanted to go and play and show that I could play and show that I still had a lot to offer, despite the manager not thinking so, you know.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot in that really, like, because you've touched on a lot of things there that are, I suppose, the biggest fears, particularly, we keep going back to League of Ireland players as well, where everything, the safety nets aren't there at all, but it's always like one bad injury away from you don't know what's next. It's obviously a manager doesn't like you, whatever. But there's one thing I'm always curious about is, and we've actually seen it in some high profile enough times as well, where it feels like a manager has two keepers and neither of them that he really, really would bet his life on, and he kind of moves between the two, or he might allocate one keeper to one competition, or one to the league and one to a cup and stuff like that. Even recently enough with Liverpool, before they signed Alisson, where you had Karius in goal for the Champions League and Mingling in goal for the league. To me, that sort of situation never really works, because it always feels like old school. Your keeper has to come in and be settled and know his defenders, etc., etc. Your thoughts on that? You're probably a little bit biased in terms of you want to play every game, but does it rock the boat too much if there is chopping and changing?
Yeah, like it's hard because, you know, as a manager, I suppose you'd always want competition there, and I suppose he was looking at it maybe saying, "Oh, I'm going to bring in someone really good to push me." But when I suppose you bring in someone as high profile as what he brought in from Chelsea that time, you know, the anxiety definitely does kick in to say, okay, you know, something's not right here. He's going to have to justify playing him because he's brought him in on loan. And again, you know, the parent club aren't going to send a player over if he's not going to be playing. Yeah, so I suppose it's just not knowing. Actually, do you know what? It's just not knowing where you stand. In terms of, from a goalkeeper's point of view, it's just not knowing if you're the number one, or if you're the one pushing the guy that he's just brought in, and stuff like that as well. And again, going back to from manager's point of view, you know, you want competition, but at the same time, you need your two keepers to work well together as well. Otherwise, you're not going to have healthy competition. If it's unhealthy competition, it's not going to work. You know, it's especially when
kind of nervous
training together. Well, when you're training together all the time, if you think about if the two keepers have a dislike for each other, you know, the sessions can break down so easily because the one holding the ball is in control of it, you know, so they miss kicks and things like that, you know, the session can break down. So I suppose you do need to be kind of conscious of the personality of your keepers as well. And like I said, I always would have been the type of player that probably just needs a little bit of a confidence boost the odd time as well from the manager to tell me I'm doing well, and to tell me I'm in a good place and things like that, just to reassure along the way. And that's just the way I've been. I know there's other players that couldn't give a rat's what the manager thinks. They just get on with it and not care, and come home after a game and not think about it, whereas I'll be up all night, you know. So yeah, no, it is. It's an interesting dynamic, and it's interesting to see. I suppose one of the best examples of it would be the current Mayo situation, where you've got probably two of the best keepers in the sport,
and different attributes then as well. You'd say, isn't it?
Of course, yeah. And I suppose it's widely publicised, you know, the battle that goes on there between the two Mayo keepers. But again, it shows, like, you know, that the competition, you know, it can be hard when you've got two keepers of a high quality, because, like you said, only one can play.
Yeah, well, speaking of Mayo and GAA then as well, while the League of Ireland might have taken a little, I suppose, pit stop to one side, your GAA career, would I be right in saying that GAA career kind of escalated? It sounds like it wasn't necessarily your plan to go, I'm going to go play for Mayo now and take this chapter, or was it kind of, how did it come about?
Like I said, it all started with me having to leave Sligo, and I suppose, to be honest, at the end of Sligo, things got really, really tough for me, travelling up and down to Sligo. Sorry, first of all, I was living up there, but they got so tough then that I decided to move home, back to Mayo, and travel up and down. Myself and Davy Cawley would met up with two Mayo lads, and we'd travel together every day. So we, you know, and it was tough for me at the time. I made that decision to kind of be around my family and be around, you know, my kind of friends that I would have grown up with, rather than being in the football bubble, which was, to be honest with you, at the time, wrecking my head, like, you know, because when that's the one thing, that's the other thing about being full time. if you're going through a sticky patch as a full-time footballer, you've got nothing else really
No
to take.
escape, is there?
No, there's no escape whatsoever. If you get injured, your whole focus from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed is what am I going to do today to get myself back on track, to get fit. So you don't have that job that you go to for 6 hours in that day to take your mind off your injury. You know, you don't have even something part-time, like, you know, if you were studying or something like that. That's you'll kind of, I suppose, probably draw from the full-time environment. Literally your whole life revolves around football. And I have to say as well, I'd be guilty of it too. In that little bubble of football, like, in your head, you think you're the most important person in the world. Like, the people working in, like, what I'm working in a pharma industry now, where there's directors and, you know, managers and things like that, whose job it is to make a medicine for people, to save people's lives. But when you're playing football, you're more important than that person.
Yeah.
You know, there's no two ways about it. You're more important than any of those people, because the whole little bubble revolves around you and what am I going to do to get better? What am I going to do to get my next move? What am I going to do to become the PFAI Player of the Year or the Sports Writers Player of the Year? You know, though, that's the little bubble you live in. Like, it's hard enough to describe, but when you've been through it, you do see it, and especially when you come back out of it, you realize, in a way, kind of what a dickhead you can be, you know, because again, like, my missus would have suffered, because I might say to her, I can't go to that event. You know, what time is it on? Oh, it's on at 8 o'clock. You know, I can't go because I've training the next morning and we're driving an hour to get there. And like, and it's the same for the amateur sport, or the amateur sport, like that is Gaelic football. The commitment is serious, like, you know. So again, you get into this little kind of selfish bubble. And that was the real eye opener when I left, to be honest. I realized that the world doesn't work like that, and it shouldn't work like that, you know. So that was all going on in my head when I stepped away from it. And actually, it was a massive relief. I got a call coming. I was actually training with Bose just to keep sharp, supple. You know, said, do you want to come in and do a bit with us? And I did, because there was no intention of signing or anything like that. It was literally just to keep sharp, and I was still looking to get something sorted. So I was on the way home, and I got a call from my club, basically saying, "Oh, we've got a game in Athlone tonight. Do you want to play? Because we don't have a keeper." So I popped into Athlone on the way home and played the game. And I played quite well, like, so. Okay. We'd have a pretty successful club, like, in terms of to be a good Mayo club, like, so. Played that game, and from there, then I stayed involved in that for the rest of the year, and then at the end of that year, I would have been invited in for the trials. So James Horan took over Mayo again. He was ratified as manager, and he held open trials for any players that had done well in the club championship during that year. So I went to them. I must have done something right, because at the end, obviously, James came up and brought me into the panel, and it was looking promising for me to you know, push on in that, I suppose, in a different world for me, because I had a lot to catch up on after 10 years out of the game. You know, the game changed massively. The game is very different for goalkeepers, hugely different. And to be honest with you, I relished it for that year. It was one of the best years I've had in the last couple of years, you know.
Yeah, like, there's so many different tangents there that I'd be very curious about. Like, you have a person that experienced full-time football as well. You're probably going back to, in effect, full-time GAA, really, particularly with the Mayo scene. You're probably at that situation in your career where you were probably relishing the new challenge. It was new. It sounded like you were pretty peed off with a lot of things in the footballing world, and this was the freshness, and you probably, even from the little while talking to you, you can tell your personality where you just tore into it, or something new, and you wanted to be the best, etc. But how it's an impossible question, but how can you compare the two codes? It's something that people compare. Obviously, the actual roles and the positions are, while they're still between the nets, they're completely different. I think obviously there's a big difference. Even simple things like the football, the physicalness, the mindset, really. I know, and the game is both games are evolving. Probably Gaelic football is probably evolving more than football at the moment. Completely different learning curve to be in for you. How could you how do you compare those two environments if it is possible? It's probably something you get asked a lot.
No, look, it's definitely possible. I think when you compare it, there's probably a few ways. Like I don't think that anybody who's involved in GAA, I don't think they give the League of Ireland the credit it deserves for the quality that's in it. That's one thing I firmly believe in. I think, like you said earlier on, the league mightn't get the exposure, but there's some unbelievable games.
Absolutely.
Like going back to Drogheda, the best atmosphere I've ever played in, bar cup final day, because that's obviously, you know, a massive occasion and things like that. But it would be the Drogheda Dundalk derby, like the home game, the away game. Like you're talking, you know, the hatred is just so real, like, you know, and you can feel it, and it drives you on to do well. Like one of my good mates from literally just around the corner here where I live now, John Mountain, he was playing for Dundalk, I was playing for Drogheda, two of us are from Mayo, you know, but like we both feel the rivalry, you know, and that was something that was there, and it was real, you know. Going back to the difference then, like, you know, I do think that the League of Ireland is kind of not frowned upon, but kind of, you know, the nose can be turned up at it sometimes, but I don't think people realise the quality of the players, and I don't think that the people realise the commitment that is actually in the League of Ireland then as well. On top of that, you've got the full-time teams, but you've got part-time teams who are essentially full-time teams as well. The way
and like a full-time calendar as well, midweek games, away games. Like, yeah.
Well, that's it. You're fitting 40 odd games into a 33-week season, like, you know, including the cups and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, so you're fitting a serious amount of, which then that's one of the differences in the GAA calendar. You don't have anywhere near as many games in that time frame. You know, you've won a week really. When you take the league is every week, and you have a break then in between, like the fourth week and the last week and the final, and then we were straight into championship because we had the early game against New York, and then pushed on for the rest of the championship and got to the semi-final of it. But with Mayo that year, we had more games than we ever had because you had the qualifiers and Super 8s.
Super 8s, yeah.
So because we lost we lost that second game in Connacht, it meant we had to qualify the hard way for the All-Ireland series. So that year there was more games, but that felt natural to me. You know, it might not have been natural to the GAA guys, you know, because especially in a successful county like Mayo, where, you know, you might win the Connacht final. I know they haven't won in a few years since, you know, this year's obviously the first in a few years, but you're not used to going through that system where you have to play every week. Whereas I was used to playing every week, used to playing twice a week. So I suppose there's one difference, is the amount of games. But what I will say is the culture is different. Like I said, at Sligo, where, you know, I'd come from playing for Athlone up to Drogheda and then moving up another level to Sligo full time. I was moving kind of up the curve at the time, and then you had that guy coming over from Chelsea who was coming down the curve, but we were meeting at the same level, like. Mm-hmm. You've got that in football massively. You've got a dressing room full of guys with different ambitions, different stages of life, different kind of objectives. You know, you've got a young lad that wants to go to England, but you've got the hometown young lad that just wants to play for their hometown. And the manager has to manage all that together. Whereas in GAA, you have this group of lads that have one objective since they were kicking ball. And that is firstly to get into that panel, then to be starting in that panel or starting on that team, and then to go and win an All-Ireland. Like, you know, you have a complete change of, I suppose, atmosphere there straight away. You've got a culture already kind of built there where the lads have grown up together. They play against each other in games, club games. They've known each other since they were young. You've got some going out with each other's cousins and sisters, and, you know, you've got all this kind of, you know, familiarity, and that's where the real culture difference comes in then as well. Where you don't have that in football, because, like you said earlier, lads are moving on. You might have a guy for a year, then he's gone, and you never speak to him again. You know.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to it there as well, and I suppose some of it goes down to what we touched on at the start, where I don't think the League of Ireland gets enough credit, exposure, talking point in the general sporting conversations as well. But I guess that time then playing for Mayo, and obviously the excitement that there was when that run and stuff like that, it must have been like a kind of a rebirth back to your youth as well, and joining that roller coaster. How difficult was it to step away from that environment then?
Yeah, like to be honest, I didn't actually step away. So it was a case that I was let go from the panel last year, and what I do have to say was, if I was in any other county in the country, I probably would have had a better, another shot at it, because the caliber of keeper in Mayo is really high in the two lads. Like I said earlier, they're two of the best keepers in the country. I had 10 years away from the sport, and just touching back on the differences again, when you put the differences in, it's massively different. Like you'd have less actions in a Gaelic football match. Most of it would be kicking. But if you think about, like, even a training session, for example, you do your small bit with the goalkeeper coach, and then you'd move into your games. You've far less exposure to the ball in games, whereas in a football session, you've so much more, because you can deal with the back pass. You can, you're used a lot more, utilized a lot more. And again, you might have to make a save. You're up to make another save. The games are, you play a lot more small-sided games in training, and then the games on a match day, you've obviously the 90 minutes of kind of full interactive, coming for crosses, through balls, the whole lot, like save, and then you're up again, and you have to do a couple of kicks and things like that, so it really is. It's more kind of, you could be on it for 90 seconds to 2 minutes. You could be under pressure in a soccer match, where you've got a couple of corners to deal with and shots and things like that. Whereas in Gaelic football, you might have a busy little period where you'd have a couple of kicks in a couple of minutes, but other than that, you wouldn't have as many actions, I don't think. No, I'm sure there's someone out there that might prove me wrong, like with the statistic. I don't have the statistics of how many saves and that. Like I know. I think I remember with kicking, it was up around something like 30 to 40 times kicking in a soccer match. I remember looking at we would have got the reports after games and that was just dealing with the ball at our feet, and then you'd have another probably 10 or 12, maybe 15 actions with your hands. And then in Gaelic, I just remember my last club match was like 21 or 22 kicks in the game. I didn't have a single save to make. So it's just a small comparison there of what is. I'm sure there's stats to maybe back it up, but that was the difference. And going back then to obviously the Mayo setup, I needed to be playing games to get that familiarity back, and to get a bit of consistency and experience in the game, because I suppose the way the manager was looking at it, I'd just come back having played 10 years soccer. I was doing probably well in the year, but I wasn't playing club football. It was unfortunate that I wasn't really playing in goal for my club, and that probably did hamper me in terms of my development with Mayo, because from the manager's point of view, he's looking at and saying, well, this fella's not playing for his club, but there's another fella playing really well for his club. I'm going to bring him in. So that's what happened in the end.
That's the age-old debate, though, in Gaelic football as well, isn't it? You see that with a number of different keepers, that they're obviously playing goal on inter-county setup, but they go back to their clubs and they're often utilised outfield. You see there's so many examples in it. So I always find it very strange, I have to say. It was one of the things I remember as a kid growing up. You'd look at, you'd see an inter-county game and you'd see, oh, there's the goalkeeper, and then you go to the club game, oh, he's out midfield or he's out wing forward. I'm like, what the hell? How is this happening? I remember being at a club game with my parents. It's one of those memories that always sticks out to me. And they were like, oh, well, no, they're often the best player for the club, so they're pushed out, which.
Yeah, I don't think that was the case with me, though.
Really? Okay.
I'll be the first to admit it myself. I probably didn't deserve to be playing outfield. I remember one game. I was picked to play outfield, and I actually felt a little bit embarrassed, because I was training as a goalkeeper. It wasn't as if I was training with my club as an outfield player. I was turning up to every session with the goalkeeper gloves on and doing the goalkeeper standing in goal, and obviously then being in with Mayo, in with the county setup and playing in goal. So I remember just looking around. I remember looking at the bench, and there was 2 or 3 lads on the bench who had been playing outfield for the club for the last 10 years. And I'm starting ahead of them, and I'm thinking, this is a bit embarrassing in a way. No, I'd done okay in the game. Like I didn't look out of place, but in terms of what I was good at, like I said, I'd spent so long away from the game. It wasn't, I wasn't going to be as as good as other players outfield, you know, and without going into too much, and I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses or anything like that, and I don't want to kind of talk negatively about anyone, but you know, there was kind of a conflict of interest in the selection of the team, we'll say, and that kind of, I suppose, led to, you know, you're talking small parishes and things like that as well, where, you know, these things kind of, they happen. Look, they happen all over the country. I don't have any bad feelings towards the club, and that I love the club. And to be honest with you, when I left, when I knew that, when I knew I wasn't going to be back to Galway, it was still going to be an option for me to go back and play for the club. Because, like I said, I think I said it to you offline, you know, I was considering packing it in after that. So that all led to me obviously going back to Galway then last year. And Murph's, to be fair, had tried to get me the year before when I was already in with Mayo.
Seems to be a common theme here. There's a lot of managers that have you on the radar.
Yeah. Like, I suppose around here, like Murph's was obviously a Galway United legend as a player, but he was also a Mayo man too. And, you know, I would have met him. He'd be friends with a lot of those lads I spoke to about at the very, very start. Murph's would have actually be friends with them, but them lads that would have been kicking the balls at me and sending me home crying. So yeah, he got me back to Galway. And to be honest with you, I signed with Murph's because he showed a real keen interest in me and really wanted me, which I just didn't feel that I had since I'd left Sligo. I felt a bit like that I hadn't, you know, necessarily been wanted anywhere. I kind of had to go and work for it myself, you know.
Yeah, so that was it. Must have been a kind of a strange time all around. So obviously there's kind of the little bit of excitement, I'd imagine, in getting back in the football and calendar again, getting in that after the little break away. But the first half of the season didn't really, I suppose, mix emotions all around.
Oh yeah, and I suppose I had that decision to make again. Like, you know, do I stay? I could have stayed in Mayo and played Gaelic football, but, you know, I wasn't really going to get the opportunity I needed. If I'd been, you know, guaranteed that I was going to get a fair crack at playing, I'd have probably gone and tried to get back into the Mayo team through performing well with my club. That was plan A at the time.
Okay.
And then Merce came along with plan B. As soon as I signed with Merce, I knew I was kind of back where I belonged, and I'd missed it. You know, it was the first time I actually thought about missing football since I left Sligo, because my heart was broken a bit with football. So I didn't kick a ball. I think I played in like a work 5-a-side tournament, like just a 20-minute or 30-minute mess around during that year, and that was the only bit of football I played all year. Because, like crazy. I said, I just had that bit of heartbreak for it. I just didn't fancy it. I didn't watch football. Like, I'd be a football. I didn't watch games. I was watching Gaelic football. I was watching the tapes that we got sent, the video analysis that we got sent, trying to learn about the sport that I had been involved. So when I went back to Galway, I felt back at home again. Everything felt comfortable again, you know, because I'd been working so hard at something that wasn't familiar to me for a long, long time, and I was a bit rusty at it, and the cobwebs are there. But then I went back to this, and we played a game actually with the PFAI over in Rochdale.
I remember that game, yeah.
That was where I knew I had to go back. So I signed for Murphy, and like you said, we didn't get the best start of the season. We lost the first game, and then we drew down in Wexford, and then we were due to play Cabinteely. Actually, we drew clean sheet in Wexford, and then we had a clean sheet and a win against Athlone in the League Cup. So we were going into the Cabinteely game with actually a bit of form, because we'd had the 0-0 draw, and then the win. So we were going, right, season starts now. And obviously then it all imploded. COVID hit, lockdown hit. We had about 2 months, no training put together, you know, out running the hills of County Mayo. I was like a madman. I've never done kilometres like it in my life, and I never will again. But it was something different. And then when we came back from the lockdown, we just couldn't get a result.
It was that. It's, you know, it's funny how it all comes together again. Ultimately, I guess it was that defeat at Drogheda. That was the sad departure, really, because I always think it's sad, particularly with a player that has given so much and is a club legend. But I guess like ultimately you take the cold, heartless approach. It was the right thing to do, but it always saddens me in a little situation like that, and particularly with someone like for your circumstances as well that had kind of brought you back in. You probably felt like you owed him a lot. You know, he's
I
resparked that love.
definitely did. Yeah. Like, and again, for me, I was powerless because when we came back from lockdown that time, we the first game back from the first friendly back, played Sligo in Sligo, and in the last minute there was a corner, and Carlton came flying into me while I was standing, and I ended up rupturing my MCL. So I wasn't even part of the squad for all those games. Like I was on the comeback trail. As soon as I knew I was able to rehab it, I was back on the training ground doing my own bits and pieces. So I didn't have any. I was helpless really to help him out or to help the team out or any of that kind of stuff. I was just focused on, like they kind of said, I might miss the rest of the season, but having spoken to the medical staff and all that, I knew there was a chance I'd get back, and thankfully I did. I got back ahead of time, which was great, and got to play a role then in the end of the season in that kind of playoff promotion push. So it was just unfortunate that I suppose I wasn't able to help out. I was probably 2 weeks off, two or 3 weeks off being able to help out a bit. But like you said, I suppose results spoke for themselves. We didn't win a game, and I suppose, look, we can probably hold our hands up and say, because obviously players always have a part to play in it. But look, it was just one of those unlucky things that happens, you know.
Yeah, well, you definitely put a lot of groundwork into where the new fresh approach really. I guess when John come back in, John Caulfield, took charge, it created a lot of excitement. I suppose largely I suppose obviously it created a big excitement in Galway getting such a big name, but nationally then as well, having such a big name back in the league, back with Galway. And look, everybody knows John's passion for football and for Irish football as well, and the passion that he's shown for the project there as well, and you know the real kind of I think he's approached really for football away from the Dublin regions, for want of a better word, you know, and pushing football in other areas. And look, that was a remarkable, complete turnaround. Everything went right. It was a crazy result of win of games, some dramatic late winners, some crazy games. That 6-2 in Athlone where you pulled off that wonder save was still up there as one of the most craziest games of football I've ever seen. The win away to Cabinteely as well, with Stephen Christopher free kick, 97th minute or whatever it was.
There was a lot of late wins in there, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. And then of course Bray in the league, and then off the field stuff, and then come back in, and you missed the league game in Bray, but you were back in for the playoff semi-final in Bray then as well, and that was another great one as well, because Bray had just narrowly missed out on the Premier League, or sorry, on the Division 1 title, and they just narrowly lost out. Even there's that little video going around of where they were delivering the cup down to Athlone to get it ready for them, and it has to do a U-turn and come back. But you come back in then, and I suppose ultimately it was one step too short, too far really, which is with Longford in the playoff, the First Division playoff final, where I think the tiredness kicked in, the suspensions with Stephen Christopher, I know was a big loss then as well. But that from someone from not that far away, you've had a crazy year. Like 2020 has been crazy for everyone, but you'd come back in, you got your love back for football, you'd saw someone close to you and someone responsible, and probably, without putting words in your mouth, someone that you felt like you deserve to, I suppose, pay back or reward for that faith and trust. He loses his job, then someone else comes in, you come back in the team, but it's just one step too far then as well. A crazy kind of crazy year. When you put it like that.
No, it literally was probably one of the most, like, I think you hinted there, the off the field stuff as well. Like it was mental from day one this year. Like I said, from the lockdown, doing your own mad bits and pieces that you never would have done around your own house, all the other kind of stuff then as well. John coming in, to be honest with you, I was okay when John came in, because I'd spoken to John before a couple of times when he was at Cork. I met him and things like that. So I knew John kind of had a good I had a good reputation in John's mind, I suppose, or he respected me, and I suppose he held me in high enough regard as well. So, as soon as I got back from injury, he showed faith in me, and it was a funny one because there was nothing really said. I didn't speak an awful lot to John. We didn't speak to each other that much, but he put me in for that game against Longford, and thankfully, after a poor start, we came good, and we were really, we were really ruthless in that second half down in Longford. Probably worked against us in the end, because Longford had an extra bit of motivation in the tank then for the next game. But then, like you said, played a couple of games on the hop, and missed out on the Bray game, but to come back in then for the last couple of games, and then play the playoff games as well. Only, actually just before that was the break with the COVID. We had to take the 2 weeks self-isolation.
Oh, that's right, after the Longford game.
It was always going to be one club that got it first, and it just happened to be us again, just leading into the mad year that it was. It was one of our players that picked it up, and obviously we all had to self-isolate then for 14 days, missing out on training and stuff, and that, to be honest with you, probably led a little bit into the Drogheda game. There was a lack of sharpness or whatever there. Taking nothing away, from Drogheda. They had their, they were well on it, and probably, they definitely deserved to beat us that night as well. They were the better side. The late win against Cabo, the late win against Bray, and then the playoff game against Bray as well, with the late enough winner in that game too. I think the second time around against Longford, then it just kind of, I think they got their game plan right. They had their homework done. They knew what they needed to do to beat us, and I thought they were very, very good that day. And they went on and showed then that they deserved to go up, because they beat Chels as well in that playoff final as well.
Yeah, so. No, absolutely. It was a case of one step too far, really. But I suppose after that, then the things changed a lot more. So John has come in. He'd come in halfway through the season, as we discussed. But this is where I'm particularly interested in, just to get, it's a unique circumstance. You don't really get to see behind the scenes a good bit, because John has come in, and for anyone that is not aware, he's pretty much implemented a full-time footballing scheme with Galway United now. That's his vision for the future. Everybody's going to be in every day, and it's meant that the side that we don't see a lot of guys like yourself and a number of other people who have other careers to supplement, to pay the mortgage, to do all the grown-up stuff, all the ugly stuff, to pay the bills. But there has to be a balancing act with that. There's only a certain amount of hours in the day. You can't, your work, particularly now when the way industry has been so affected by 2020 and everything, margins are tighter and tighter. So trying to juggle, and I know I've spoken to a couple of players like this about this similar subject as well, trying to juggle that life, important goals, work, and the joy of playing football or playing part-time football or whatever it is. It's a very difficult juggling act to get right, and particularly for the older players as well that are more concerned about the grown-up stuff. It's different if you're younger, you're free and easy out of college. You can make that sacrifice a bit more. You can maybe see it as an investment. But for someone in your situation like that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think you would have, in an ideal world, you could have maybe stayed at Galway if the circumstances had stayed right. How difficult is that challenge?
Yeah. Oh, well, look, again, I mentioned it earlier about when I left Drogheda and a full-time job to go to Sligo. It was different this time around for me, because I was so many years down the line. I'm getting older, and obviously I can't make that gamble at the moment. And like you said, with the year we've just had, why would you leave a steady job for that risk? I had tried and worked things around, so I could make the morning sessions. But to be fair to John, he's ambitious, and he doesn't want to do things half-arsed. So, just getting to the session in Galway wasn't going to be enough for me. I needed to be available for longer in the day. And then obviously where I'm located in Mayo, it's an hour and a half, 2 hour drive with the traffic around Galway and stuff to get to training. So you're talking that either side of maybe a sort of a 10 till 2 or 9 till 3 situation, where I'd be leaving home here at 7:30 in the morning, going to Galway, and not getting home again till 4 or 5 in the evening. So in fairness, if you're going to do it right. And but I suppose there's only a certain caliber of player, or there's only a certain type of player that you can actually do that with, and I'm unfortunately not one of them, because I have that job that I need to basically pay the bills and pay the mortgage or whatever. Yeah, whatever you want to describe it like. You need that say, and you've got to think about the future as well. You're not going to be playing football, and I don't think the money is in this league for that 10 or 12 year guarantee. Whereas obviously full-time employment, you have a steadier chance at that. In the industry I'm in as well, I think there's always going to be opportunities to move on and do better. So look, to be fair to John, me and him had a great conversation about it. It just wasn't going to work in terms of what he wanted towards what I was able to offer him. I was able to offer him that I wouldn't miss the training sessions, but I couldn't be maybe hanging around for the video analysis or the gym session that might happen later on in the day. And that would be disruptive, to be fair. So that's where we came to the decision then that I wouldn't be staying on. And I suppose, look, it also came to a financial point of view. If John was able to offer me what I was on in my job and maybe offer a 2-year deal and that, but again, that security is not in the league because you don't know if you're going to be allowed supporters next year. You don't know if you're going to be, what kind of sponsorship you're going to get after the 2020 situation. Are companies going to have money to invest and things like that? So I'd say what he's doing is within what's realistic to do, and I suppose the target kind of player you're looking at then is the kind of younger player who will use it as a great opportunity to taste full-time football or get into full-time football and use it then to move on. And look, I wish them all the best and all the success in the world, except obviously against us.
Yeah, except those couple of games. But
yeah,
I'm curious to see, and I remember even messaging you around the time, and you've obviously witnessed, you've had some great successes but in your career, but there's been the peaks and troughs that have gone with it, the highs and low. When you get news like that, I know it's probably kind of half your decision in the way, you obviously the square holes into round circles there, it just didn't work out. But after getting your excitement back in the game, to have that pulled away, and I know touching on something that you said earlier, where you're looking around and there's only a certain amount of clubs that want goalkeepers, etc. How daunting is that?
It's something I was kind of expecting, to be honest, because again, having been around the league a long time, the rumours were there that we were going full time next year and these were the plans. So I'd actually started putting wheels in motion with work before I even spoke to John to see what was kind of possible in terms of I had arranged that I would go into work at 2:00 in the day and then work for the rest of the night or work for the rest of the evening and then do my normal day after that. So it was kind of, but again, I always joke as well, saying that, you're never in the middle in football. There's never just that straight line. Like you said, you're either sky high as a kite, full of beans, or you're on the floor thinking, I'm not going to be able to move on here. So to be honest, when I met John, my first initial thought was, I'm finished. I'm done. There's no option for me, realistic option, where I can play at the level I want to play at, or to be honest with you, at the level I'm capable of playing at, but without giving up my job. Where I'm based in Mayo, it's a 2-hour drive to Galway, it's a 2-hour drive to Athlone or Longford, but Longford train in Dublin, so that's a 3+ hour journey. You've got Finn Harps, who from work would be a 3.5-hour journey, so yeah. I just don't have the options available to me really, realistically. So my first thought was, I've done a lot of coaching and tutoring and things like that. My first thought was to look and try and maybe put that wheel into motion to go into something slightly different, something that I could manage along with my job and still be successful and still offer a lot. I suppose the real way I was feeling was, firstly, I'm too young to finish playing, and I still have a lot to offer somebody who wants to take a chance, or somebody who shows faith in me. And the second thing was then I'm too old to be putting all my eggs in the League of Ireland footballer basket, and leave a job like what I'm in to go to Galway or to go somewhere else full time. Even if I was it would be even a risk to move back to Dublin and look for a different job and play part-time with a club up there as well, because the I suppose the cost of life up there is so much more expensive and things like that as well. And you'd be leaving a job during a pandemic where you mightn't be guaranteed to walk into another job. So I suppose that's just a snapshot of all the things that were.
A lot of stuff going on in that head of yours.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. So no, look, I suppose that probably leads us on. I'm just delighted to be started, to have that option. And when Cabsy rang me, I know Cabsy from before, so I was always going to sit down and have a chat. But as soon as we spoke, I kind of got the feeling from him that it was going to be positive, and it didn't take an awful lot of negotiating or anything like that to get me over the line, because I just want to play football. Like I said, I want to finish. I want to give it one last lash now, and I feel like Athlone is the right place to do that for myself.
Yeah, no, I have to say, my first reaction when I heard the news or heard possibility news was like, thank God, because it is that R word was there. Well, even for me, I was thinking like way too young to have to go. And yes, I appreciate the environment and the way football in Ireland is so Dublin based that your options are hard, particularly when you factor in, you know, your lifestyle and your working conditions as well. But that has to be a very scary thought. I was going, oh, in my head for you. So to have those thoughts, you said earlier, you come home from games, you think about it, think about all the stuff going through your head. It must have been a nervous enough sort of time, that transition from leaving Galway to your signing with Athlone. A lot of stewing back and forth in your head, I bet.
I'll be honest and say the biggest concern of mine about finishing playing football and retiring was what other people would think. That is genuinely my biggest, my biggest fear was he's not good enough to play anymore. You know, he finished up at Sligo. He wasn't good enough to play at Sligo that time. He wasn't, things didn't work out at Galway. You know, they don't want him anymore. And he's retired because he's not good enough. That was genuinely what was kind of going through my head. When I know inside, Jesus, I have so much more to offer. If the league was structured differently here, I'm sure I'd still be playing maybe full time somewhere. If things had fallen in the right place, you know, if I'd let's say signed for Bray that time immediately after leaving Sligo, then all of a sudden I was still in the shop window for the rest of that season, and I might have been able to prove people wrong in that year. But because I missed the rest of that year, my stock dropped, and then all of a sudden I had to come back into the first division, and thankfully, you know, Murphs gave me that opportunity to do that. But yeah, no, that was my biggest, I suppose, fear, that I wasn't good enough, or that I was finished. And I suppose the other one as well was the fact that I've had a couple of injuries now. A lot of them have been from contact, in terms of, you know, that one, the MCL was somebody falling into my knee. I done my ankle ligaments where somebody landed on me, you know, stuff like that. And people don't realise that sometimes. They just think, oh, he's injury prone, he's crocked, this, that, and the other. But if anybody saw the level of work I do outside of football to kind of, you know, counteract that, I suppose they realise, well, people don't realise that. And again, I know this, and I know I shouldn't care what people think, but like, you spend your whole life with your life revolving around that sport, and the sport that you put all your time and effort into. You do your diet plans, you know, you write down every day what you're eating, you're counting calories, you're doing all sorts of stuff that normal people just don't do, for the I suppose for the right, and earning the right to get on the pitch and play well. And people, I suppose, don't really see that, you know.
Yeah, I have to say, before we let you go, I'm a little bit not, I suppose, taken back a little bit. Like, you were a guy that's in both codes, has gone to the top of the level. I'm sure you've heard and the stuff being said to you, both in face to face or online and stuff like that. But at deep down, it still is in the back of your mind, not a worry, but it's there, thinking what people say about you.
I suppose it doesn't matter what, you've got those insecurities, don't you? Like, again, going back to the not being good enough part, like, you know, not being good enough to be in with Mayo. To be honest, not being good enough to play with your club. You know, I was like, in the manager's mind of my club at home, place where I grew up, and now look, again, I know I spent 10 years away. There's no automatic right for me to come back into that club and just be number one. I know that. I'm not stupid. I'm not that self-centered or anything like that. But the people would have nearly the ammunition to say, sure, he couldn't even start for his intermediate club in Mayo. What's he doing thinking of going to League of Ireland, or, you know, like this kind of stuff, you know. And that's, I suppose, where that all comes into it, and where those kind of insecurities can build up, because I've had those setbacks of, like, that, not playing for my club in Kilchimon, not playing for Mayo, getting released from Sligo, now not being able to play for Galway, but because of slightly different circumstances, obviously as well. But again, it's something that a lot of people wouldn't realise.
Yeah, that certainly is. And no, not that you'd say, look, everybody, I suppose, reacts to different circumstances differently. It was part of my head that you'd be so much that you develop that thick skin that you wouldn't even, what someone say to you wouldn't even matter. But it's interesting to see that deep down, it's still, I suppose, every action has a consequence, and whether it be that verbal or what that's been said to you or whatnot.
I suppose at the end of the day, when you're a footballer, or whether it be a Gaelic footballer, a professional footballer, your job is to entertain people, and if they're not happy with your performance, you're not entertaining them. So how can you not have that little bit about you that, you know, kind of thinks about what they thought of you, or, you know, did the supporters at that club like me, or did they have, you know, that kind of silly stuff. Like, you know, at the end of the day, you're there to play for their club. And I've been lucky enough that some of the clubs I've played for have become my club, and, you know, every club I play for, I don't care. At the time I'm playing for them, it means everything. I try and get as involved as I possibly can in learning about the history and learning about things that have gone on at the club, and being part of that culture of the club, which is really hard in the League of Ireland to really grasp, because it's not the same as it is in GAA. It's easier to get sucked into the culture of the GAA because it's so powerful. But in the League of Ireland, the clubs have to work harder to kind of create that atmosphere.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, absolutely. That's fascinating, I have to say. Before we let you go, then, of course, it is back to Athlone. Pre-season won't be too far away. The slog just put a nice little memory in your thought in your head there. It's going to be a manic season ahead. Obviously, the last season gone by just went on a good bit more than a good bit more longer than expected, given the circumstances. It's great for us fans and media outlets covering the game. We've a shorter window of the season to come back, but it's going to be more challenging next year for the players. It was already a dogfight of a league. We've seen the teams that have come down. I think you touched on it earlier as well, like Cork and Shells. Have you ever seen two bigger teams come down at once? And then you look around the top of the league. Obviously, Galway fell short last year. You've Bray still there. Camanteely will be absolutely livid to come back and so motivated, given the way their season kind of ended, and particularly with the off the field stuff as well. So many teams, and of course Athlone as well. We have to throw them in the mix as well here. You must be looking forward to getting back in, not the slog of pre-season, but getting back into games again.
No, not the pre-season bit. Yeah, I've been through a lot of pre-season.
I say that.
I can't say there's a pre-season that I've enjoyed too much, but no, look, it will be. I can't wait to get back into it. Like you said there, like, I think this is probably going to be the most high profile first division, and not being disrespectful to any clubs now, but since maybe, remember, Derry and Cork came down that time, and there was and UCD and Galway weren't in at that time, but Waterford were there. Like, I think you're going to have a really, really manic, like you said, first division, and put another word, it'll be chaos. Like, it'll be chaos, because you're going to have the teams all probably beating each other. And I suppose I haven't actually spoken to Cabsy about this, so I don't know what I'm allowed to say about Athlone, but like I'd assume we're probably coming in maybe a little bit under the radar and hoping to surprise a few teams and disappoint a few teams with good performances and things like that, and possibly try and just really be competitive, I suppose. You know, they're coming off the back of probably a transitions year where Athlone would have always trained in Dublin for the last couple of years, and even as far back as last time I was involved, we trained in Dublin one night a week, and then trained in Athlone all together. So I think there's a real culture of the club coming back to the town there as well, which is great to see. Facilities there are honestly, you've got everything on site. You've got a town that's probably got a good, like a massive football history, but also probably, you know, when things are going well, they will get the support. You've got a college there that has a really good kind of a sport emphasis in the college, with facilities, with success, all that kind of stuff. And then, like, you've got the stadium with the grass pitch. You've now got obviously the all weather on the main pitch. Like, it really is set up for success, and hopefully it'd be nice now to be the start of a bit of success, you know. Like you said, it's peaks and troughs, so hopefully I'm through all the troughs. I'm a bit full, so I'm ready for the
You're
beats.
certainly due for that upward curve again. Like before I let you
Yeah,
go,
I'm ready
like
for it.
your start of your sporting career was so high. You've talking about playing like an All
Yeah.
Ireland final and then going full time at Sligo, etc. And then you're more than due. There's been a couple of wobbles in between, but what a fascinating listen, I have to say, Micheál. A really eye-opening experience. Like even more, I always knew there was a good bit to your career, but fascinating to get behind the scenes. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I think your
No, thanks, sir.
dogs on the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
side of the room don't appreciate
I was just gonna say, can you hear that? You can hear
they
her.
don't
She's
appreciate
only
it.
a puppy, like, and I said I better leave her out, otherwise, because I'd be fiddling here and like she'd be up here.
Well, I think you've a bit
Oh,
of your pre-season starts there. They look like they will
yeah.
go out for a
Get the
stretch of the
steps
legs.
in, all
So
right. No,
we
thanks
thank you so
for.
much. We wish you the best of luck in
Yeah,
your new adventure with Athlone. We'll be bumping into you after games. I say from a personal point of view, I can't wish you good luck against Galway, but the very best luck in all the other games. Yeah, no doubt
exactly.
our paths will cross again. Thank you so much for your time. That was a
No, thanks,
fascinating.
Emil. Thanks for putting up with me for this long.
Thank you very much.
No, fair play. Cheers, Jonathan.